Happy New Year, Ask the Expert listeners. Happy New Year. Happy 2020. Welcome to a new year of our Ask the Expert podcast series. I am your host, Amy Board. Today we have an episode that is just warm and toasty. After those last two episodes that we had with Dr. Wang and Dr. Ng from the University of Colorado that were very popular. I think you guys were completely into it. This month in January, we decided to kick things off with our beloved mental health advocate and resource connector, Debbie De La Riva, who is going to share a little bit about the mental health movement in the bleeding disorder community, as well as some of the sticky and uncomfortable things about goal setting that we all do in the beginning of the year, except for me. That was the thing that comes out in the podcast, is I out myself as being an ungoal setter, because I'm one of those horrible people that can just foreshadow that I'm going to be bummed that I don't follow through with anything. So I just don't do anything, which is not the way to do it, listeners. I just don't think it's the way to do it. But unfortunately, that's something that I personally have to work through. Anyway, we have a wonderful conversation with Debbie, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. I think one of the things that's exciting about speaking with Debbie today is that we get to talk about the partnerships that are coming up this year in 2020 with Debbie and her organization, Mental Health Matters 2, with the National Hemophilia Foundation, and with Believe Limited. The things that have been in the works for the past, I would say, 2 months around mental health resources and awareness pieces for mental health in our bleeding disorder community out of NHF and out of Believe are really exciting. And I think the two organizations rightly have identified Debbie as the epicenter of the movement in terms of her work and her work with HTCs and with community members and with chapter leaders. So very excited to talk about those a little as we gear up for the official announcement of some of those things. But it's going to be a good listen. It'll be a good conversation. So I'm so glad that you are here with us today. Just a reminder to subscribe to Bloodstream and to Ask the Expert. We have some updates from the podcast world here at Bloodstream Media. I would encourage you to subscribe. Some of you guys just listen on YouTube. Some of you listen kind of, as the topic pertains to you, which I understand and I full blown agree with. So do you, but I would encourage you to subscribe, because coming out slowly here at the beginning of 2020, Bloodstream in particular is going to start releasing things to subscribers only. And they're just going to be small little bits here and there, but you're going to be getting a lot more content if you subscribe, and I don't want you to miss anything. So to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, whether it's Apple, whether it's something fancy, make sure to subscribe to that podcast so you can get all of the benefits and all the stuff that's going to come out. Another thing that's exciting is that Ask the Expert is moving to a new format. Don't flip out. It's the same thing, only cooler. Starting in February, you are going to get 2 episodes of Ask the Expert every month. They will be released on the 4th Monday of every month, like normal, like we do now, but you're also going to get a bonus episode on that Thursday. So the 4th Thursday of the month, you're going to get a bonus episode with the same guest, and we're going to dive into that guest personally a little bit. We're going to get their personal reactions to some of the things that they mentioned. We're going to get the opportunity to get to know them a little bit more, which will be fun. I'm excited for substance and emotional and relational connection with our guests that we have. So you get to know these people a little bit more, and hopefully they can become a little bit more humanized to you. So look out for that. We are very excited about that. So again, I just want to do a plug for all of your questions, for your thoughts, maybe even topics. If you have a topic or a certain guest that you would like to see on Ask the Expert, I take that into account. So please let us know. Emailing is going to be the best at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com. Again, email me at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com. So let's get into it, shall we? Let's get into it. Our conversation with Debbie De La Riva. Debbie is a licensed counselor. She's based out of Houston, Texas. And she has started an organization, Mental Health Matters Too, which is all things mental health, in particular for the bleeding disorder community and the rare disease community. Her kind of shining achievement, in particular in the last 18 months, is she has put together a extremely comprehensive resource guide. If you are wondering where to go, if you're feeling alone, if you are in a rural city and don't have access to mental health care, I encourage you to go to Mental Health Matters Too and check out that resource guide. All of these links are in our program notes here on the Ask the Expert podcast. And I encourage you to look through that and see if there is something that resonates with you, whether it is a depression screening, whether it is a hotline for you to talk to someone, whether it might be a new idea for you to connect with someone in your town, your HTC, or a friend. I really encourage you to check that out. You are not alone in this, and there are many resources available and many different levels of resources available depending on your comfort level and where you are in your life. You are exactly where you need to be and should be, and the resources and the access is there. It truly is. Debbie is a good friend to me in particular, and a good friend to many of you in the community, and so we are so excited to have her kick off our Ask the Expert 2020 year. So grab yourself a cup of coffee and let's have ourselves a conversation. I am your host, Amy Board, and welcome to episode 35, or our New Year's resolution watch out episode of the Ask the Expert podcast. Debbie, we are so thrilled to have you back on Ask the Expert to kick off 2020. Welcome, as always.
Hi, Amy. Great to be here.
And you know, I need to say that I just said Ask the Expert. Like, it's Ask the Expert is a very difficult thing to say. And obviously I haven't been podcasting for about a month because I need to redo Ask the Expert. My goodness. Debbie, I would imagine most of our audience would know you from our extensive work, or your extensive work rather, in our community, as well as your appearances on the monthly mental health segment on Bloodstream that we host together. But I'd love to begin with a little get to know you set of questions just to level set and just to introduce you to some of the folks maybe that don't know you as well. You were such a voice and an advocate for the bleeding disorder community, and I'd love to know where that started. Where did your activism generate from?
No, definitely. It's really a very simple answer. My activism started with November 30th, 1994. When my son Jorge was born with severe hemophilia. It started with motherly instincts to protect and to be proactive. So I found my chapter, I found my HCC. But really, Amy, the activism didn't really kick in until I became the executive director of the Lone Star chapter, because then I was surrounded by people who knew the power of making great programming, making sure people are having what they needed. So that's when it really got started for me.
Debbie, did you have a history of hemophilia in your family, or was Jorge's diagnosis something of a surprise?
Yes, very much a surprise. I have 3 sisters and several nephews. No one had it, and there was no history in our family.
What was that like? What was that time like?
Well, for me, I just knew that when I'm faced with a problem like that, I just need information. That's my first part of it. And then I needed support, when things got rough. But just connecting people that knew more than me is what got me through that.
And then you mentioned that you were the executive director of the Lone Star chapter. I love that. Tell me a little bit about how that started in terms of you getting involved there, and where you are now. I know you're doing work in the mental health aspect of our community. So tell me a little bit about that executive directorship and your transition into the work you're doing now.
Yeah, and it's really, that's where the seeds of Mental Health Matters Too really came about, because in the beginning, Amy, I found myself in that position to help people, to be that source of knowledge, but more importantly, to be that source of something that they can talk to and talk things out with. And I found that was my strength. And then, boy, when I started working in advocacy, really becoming aware of how vulnerable we are as a community, and that we need things to be going our direction, legislatively in particular. And so it just began to build on itself, because then I saw the power of like-minded people who are set in the right direction. So it just helped me gain confidence in my ability to lead people and to know what's going to be helpful or not.
Debbie, you mentioned that you are a licensed counselor. So your passion for mental health, in particular in the bleeding disorder community, makes sense, and it feels very aligned. Did you see a certain uptick in the community voicing concern about mental health, or the conversation really starting about mental health? What has it been like for you as you've seen the genesis of all of this? When did it really start that we became more engaged with that aspect of our well-being?
No, I was thinking about that recently, because when I was the executive director of the chapter, even though I just mentioned I was there for people emotionally and what have you, but I really wasn't aware of what it was really like for other people to live with a bleeding disorder. And really, I mean, it isn't until I started asking the question, creating some kind of environment around me that it was okay to talk about this stuff. And that's when the snowball effect really started to happen, galvanized really the last couple of years. People started talking. Other people saw that they're not the only one. And before I knew it, there was this element that you can create this environment where the shame is not there, where people know it's okay to talk about this. And more importantly, they feel like they're not the only one with these types of thoughts. That's really why I created Mental Health Matters Too.
Perfect transition, like the podcast pro that you are. Tell me a little bit about Mental Health Matters Too. It is an organization that you started a while ago. When did you start? About 2 years ago? Tell me a little bit about it and what the mission of the organization is.
Definitely. It really started in the late part of 2017, but it didn't develop into a tangible organization until 2018. Maybe a lot of people that know me in this capacity know that really the idea of Mental Health Matters Too started just a few months after attending Barry Hardy's funeral, and was faced with the realization that if we could lose Barry to suicide because of just unspoken depression and anguish, there's got to be countless others who are feeling or have felt the same way as him. And so what I decided is that really Mental Health Matters Too is based on two ideas. We need to make sure that everybody understands the mental health issues that are facing all of us. We need to know how to recognize the signs, and we need to learn how to talk about it. But the main focus of Mental Health Matters Too is to help people try to figure out where to go for support and care. And so it's really those two things: having increased knowledge of the common issues we're facing, and where to go when things get to be too much and you need professional help.
I know you spent the majority of last year putting together and continuing to build a fairly comprehensive resource guide that is on Mental Health Matters Too. It has been such a labor of love for you. Tell us a little bit about that guide, how it got its start, who it's for, and where people can access it. Where can they find it?
You know, that's kind of an interesting story too, because I believe that life just kind of takes you to where you need to go. So I've always been in mental health. I've had several jobs where I've actually had to develop resource guides. And so being in the field for the past 25 years, I got really acquainted with what's out there. And not just organizations. People need to know about places to go to get care, but people also need to know about different hotlines they can call when they're just in a tough spot. There's hotlines for LGBTQ. There's hotlines for young adults, just specifically for them. People need to know that there's actually free support groups going on around them in most major cities. And the other thing is about the guide is that I make sure I put a section on books and apps, because when you're having emotional problems, it's not just about talking to someone, it's not just about taking pills. It's really about exploring the issues yourself and journaling. And so I wanted to make sure people knew about where to get the information.
Can you, this is going rogue from our list of questions, Debbie. I do this every episode. It's terrible. I go rogue. Tell me a little bit about the importance of hotlines in particular. I would imagine there's some unknowns in terms of what that would be like, what hotlines are for. You know, if you're experiencing something in the moment and there's a bit of a crisis, what would hotlines serve? What you should expect from calling a hotline? What is the importance of that particular resource?
No, that's an important question. So hotlines were designed because immediate help is not always possible, and they were designed to reach out to a caring, supportive person for the length of time until the crisis resolves, or you feel like you're in better control. So that was kind of the original reason for the hotline. But then, secondly, people began to use it not when they were just in crisis, but when they just need a supportive tone, someone to let them know that things will be okay, and to give them information on where to turn for different resources. So it's just not about calling when you're in a suicidal crisis. But the benefit and what the science has shown is that that's by having a hotline itself, what happens is you break that cycle from an emotional emergency to action. There's actually a space between them to help you calm down, to make better decisions about what you need to do, where you need to turn.
That's great. That's helpful. The last time that you were a guest on Ask the Expert, it was the summer of 2018. And so I wanted to bring up that conversation that you had with Chris Bombardier in the summer of 18. I think it was July, and it was about mental health, and it was an overview. And I just wanted to ask, since that time, what have you focused on and continued to work on and found most compelling as you've continued this work in our community in particular?
One of the things, be careful what you ask for type of thing. I feel like, once the conversation got started and it caught on, it was opening up Pandora's box, but not in a negative way. It was opening up, it was increasing the chances of people talking about how they were really feeling and what they're really going through. So really what I've seen is that the demand for programming, for example, from national organizations and chapters for mental health presentations has just gone out the roof, grown exponentially. But it's not just because we're now more aware of issues in our community. I think society as a whole, we are more apt to consider mental health conditions as just as real as physical health conditions. We also know now that there's treatment, and so there's hope that goes with treatment. But I think the thing that's really increasing the demand in our community, it has to do with something really wonderful, and that is that we're living better lives in the bleeding disorder community due to treatment and due to knowledge. A lot of people might remember in high school psychology, the Maslow hierarchy of needs. Once you can take care of your basic survival skills, like survival needs, food, water, shelter, medication, I think then people really begin to be more open to how other needs that are within their lives, about the need to fit in, the need to feel good about themselves. So I think all of this is added. Last year, Amy, I went around the country. I gave over 25 presentations and trained 163 of us in the community on mental health first aid. And the funny thing is, I started this focus as really general. I want to raise awareness about mental health conditions in our community, but now people are asking me to focus more on specifics. They want to really understand what's the prevalence of mental health conditions that we're facing as a whole. And they really want to know more about the extent of, for example, opioid addiction and abuse, and how we're all faring with that particular problem. So people want more information, is what I'm finding.
How do you, again, I'm going rogue, Debbie, in your work, in particular the last 18 months, going around to chapters and HTCs and community events, How are HTCs handling this? Just kind of clinically in the comprehensive care rotation and system, what have been your thoughts about HTC involvement in mental health?
Yeah, and I can say that I've seen a real positive interest from HTCs to find out more about this. When the HTCs were developed in the 70s, we always had the comprehensive model, right? The doc and the nurse and the physical therapists and the social workers. So there was always this openness to comprehensive cares. But now social workers are seeing that someone's mental quality, somebody's mental state has everything to do with their physical outcomes. And so I'm finding that they are becoming more proactive about finding out what's going on and hopefully finding out what's going on earlier so we have a better chance to intervene before all these psychological challenges get out of hand. So there's a real openness to learn. I've been asked by a couple of HCCs to come out and speak about mental health challenges I'm seeing within the community and to find out about resources.
Do you recommend community members and patients and caregivers go to their HTC for mental health concerns? Is it a personal choice if you have a relationship with a provider there, a social worker, or a licensed counselor at your HTC? What are you recommending to folks through this?
Definitely. And so the emphatic question is yes. That is one of the primary places you want to start by opening up and telling people what's really going on, not just physically. Because many times I've heard that people don't even realize that that's part of the social worker's job. And so I just want to dispel that myth. It's very much their job and very much their interest. Sometimes people get roadblocks, like maybe they're not clicking with that social worker, or maybe there could be some other obstacles. The thing with mental health is just like physical health. You just don't stop until you get the answers. And so that's why I developed a resource guide, because maybe you want to find a general practitioner to talk not just about your physicalness, but also about how you're thinking and feeling, and then go from there until you found that right person with the right knowledge.
So you personally, Debbie De La Riva, have some interesting partnerships that are coming up this year. Can you give us a little teaser about what we can expect from Mental Health Matters 2 here in 2020?
I'm so excited about 2020. I'm kind of having a hard time sleeping sometimes. Because I see this movement as definitely off the ground and going forward. I'm contracting with the National Hemophilia Foundation to develop 4 new mental health presentations as part of their education and empowerment series. That's going to be offered to chapters very shortly. The work that we're doing together, Mental Health Matters 2 and Believe Limited, is also taking off. I'm so proud and excited to be part of Patrick Lynch's film focusing on mental health in the bleeding disorder community, and of course the podcast that you and I are doing. I'm working really closely with Coalition of Hemophilia B. They want to have, as you heard in the podcast earlier, they want to have mental health programming in every newsletter and every event that they have. Secondly, I revised the guide to add a whole lot more components, especially different places people can receive care within the bleeding disorder community. And the thing I'm excited about, and thanks to Takeda for a grant, I'm now putting every stitch of psychosocial research studies I can find on a webpage on Mental Health Matters 2. So we'll kind of have a one-stop shop place to go to find out what the issues are, what the data is, and resources on how to take care of them. So I'm very psyched about this upcoming year.
It's so exciting. And I think your comment about the movement, the mental health movement really taking off, I think that is correct. I think the top organizations are very aware that it's a gap. The funders are very aware. Everyone seems very in tune with wanting to hear more and wanting to engage in that way. And so you have really been the epicenter of that. And I just commend you for your work and your continued dedication. You also have the temperament for it. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I want to talk to you about it. So I think I'm so excited that you are involved in so many of these, organizations that are putting out resources and education. I'm so glad that they are very aware that you are invaluable to this work. So I'm excited for you.
No, thank you so much. But I definitely cannot take the credit. Our social workers of the HTCs, they and our chapter leaders, they see it day in and day out, and they want to address it too. So it's a great team.
It is a great team. Seems like everybody is really stepping up and wanting to do what they can. It's really great. In talking about, starting the new year, a lot of people set New Year's resolutions. A lot of people create goals for themselves for the new year. I guess just to start, I personally have never done that. I've never been a goal setter, and I certainly don't do New Year's resolutions. And I think it's because of the like the known feeling that I will get when I don't follow through. And so I just don't, and I just keep going, and it just works better for me to just like do like a weekly, like here's my to do, and I just hope I do this. And so I guess just to start, because I imagine everyone's all over the map with this. What is the benefit of creating a goal for yourself, whether it's in the new year or not? What is the benefit of that? As we get started thinking about some of the ways that we can approach our goal setting and, habit change, what's the benefit of being a goal-minded person, which I am not, apparently.
So I got super interested about habits, and I've read a couple of books I can be very brief about. One of them is I decided to stop making resolutions and instead form habits that are going to lead me to wherever I wanted to go to. I read in a great book called Atomic Habits, that these changes don't have to be exponential, meaning you don't have to go to the gym 5 times a week. It talks about the 1% rule. Just doing something 1% better than you did the day before can have a cumulative results. He talked about how if Amy wanted to go from Los Angeles, he wanted to go over to New York to see one of Patrick's amazing musical programs. Mm-hmm. If the pilot just changed his degree by 1 point, you'd probably wind up in Florida, right? It's just that those small changes make a big difference in a positive way. The other thing I would definitely recommend is pick up Power of Habit. That's an amazing book, because this guy was able to make a really complicated concept into easy to understand format. What he talks about is that getting rid of a habit or wanting to create a new one has to do with the same 3 things: your cue, your habit, and your reward. Meaning that the cue is that thing that triggers you to engage in that behavior. The habit, of course, is what you do in response to the trigger, and the reward is the payoff. And you can change any one of these 3 components, and it leads to the change that you're looking for. A good way to illustrate this is the whole philosophy of AA meetings. When someone's struggling with addiction, it's a whole lot more complicated than what I'm about to describe. But many times the cue to drink has to do with just wanting to escape from your world, your thoughts and your feelings. And by drinking, you basically drown out those messages, and then you get the rest temporarily that you're looking for. So what AA did is they tinkered with the habit, and you substitute going to an AA meeting. And then that also led to the same reward, which is relief, feeling understood, feeling supported. And so it's just a good example about that. So you can change anything. I want to exercise in the morning, so the morning is my cue to exercise. And then, of course, the reward is the good feeling afterwards. So, but the key to all of this is that the craving, that you have to create a craving. And that happens just after you get the good effect for a long, long time. That's where people fall into I did it for a while and nothing happened. You have to do the new behavior to a point that it leads to such a good reward that you develop a craving for it. just like you do for chocolates. So that's my way of trying to explain that book. Oh, and one final thing, Amy, that this thing has helped me to do things like learn the piano. And the question I ask myself is that what would my life look like in a year if I did these 1% things, 1% changes every day? So that sometimes can be helpful. So that's my take on that.
In speaking about the cue component of it, the beginning, how do we put into words what's actually going on? I know that sounds fuzzy a little bit, but to take your example of drinking, we drink to drown out any thoughts or, difficult feelings that we have. What if that is not being recognized? How can we get to the bottom of it?
Yeah, so right, I made it sound a whole lot more simple than it was. You have to figure out what your cue is that leads to you doing things that you don't necessarily want to be doing. For example, let's say you're feeling overwhelmed at work, for example. Well, that's the cue. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. And so many times we do things that we procrastinate or we waste time on internet or what have you. But you have to become aware of, okay, my cue is that I'm overwhelmed. What else can I do right now that leads me to where I want to go? And that could be, your new cue is to take a 5-minute break to clear your mind, or take a drink of water, or something that's going to lead you to your behavior that won't distract you from your reward, I'm going to say.
I can imagine, speaking from experience, all this thought about things that we want to change, not understanding, not having a full understanding of what's going on inside, can lead to more stress and more disappointment with ourselves, a feeling of failure. That we can even drift even farther and lead more into, a deeper depression or an actual, very set in depression, and a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear and just unease internally. Again, this is it feels like such a naive question, but, what are some steps that we can take to make this process more effective? It feels like such a fix-it answer. How can we encourage each other, I guess, on this very difficult process that doesn't really seem to end all the time?
No, I agree with you. So what happens is we want to make some changes, but we don't. Because what gets in the way many times is self-talk. Things like, oh, you'll never do that, or you would never be able to do that, or that only happens to other people. So if you can change that negative talk into actually visualizing what would that be like once I got the reward, you're actually changing the way that you think about it. And that can help a lot with negative self-talk by taking control over it. And it also can be an amazing motivator to actually visualize what you look like, what you feel like when you make the changes, which leads to one of the things I always want to say on a podcast, of all the words that have come out of this mouth, my mouth, what could help somebody get through a day? And I can only talk from experience that what can help people the most is to realize that your mind is not to be trusted. And I know that sounds nuts, but many times it's that internal chatter that we have going on all the time that's keeping us down. And an effective way to deal with this is to just become aware of what that negative self-talk or defeating self-talk is. Some of the questions you could ask yourself, let's say you feel like you're not good enough. One of the questions you could ask yourself is, okay, where did I get that idea from? And many times you probably lead to people who were more unwell than you are, people who had their own problems. Another way I like to tell people to think about self-talk is that think about whatever it is and figure out, is that rooted in the past, or is that me anticipating the future? What can I do right now to help myself feel more relaxed?
I want to invite our listeners in a little bit, which I don't think we ever have in our mental health segments. But we both struggle with things. And we have, developed a relationship where we're able to talk about some of our deepest struggles. And I guess I just wanted to invite listeners in that we I feel we are very passionate about this, and I know from Belief Side, Patrick Lynch feels this way as well. We really struggle with this stuff, and sometimes it's a daily, weekly battle. And so I just personally want to say that, this continues to be a conversation that I think is stemming from our own lives as well. Debbie, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but.
No, definitely. In fact, I even make it part of my presentation because that is exactly what I'm trying to do, is disclose as a way to get rid of the shame. If I wasn't diagnosed as having a major depressive disorder about 7 years ago, and actually experienced 3 years of depressive episodes where I had no control over my emotions and my thoughts, if I hadn't experienced that, I would just be another person talking about it. But it was very real for me. I know I didn't have a chance in heck to get to better without medication. And it's because of that I see this as real, and I see that it requires treatment, intervention, and there's nothing wrong with it. It is what it is.
If you are listening and you are identifying with some of these things that we're discussing, please feel free to reach out to Debbie and I personally. Also, please check her resource guide on the Mental Health Matters 2 website, which will be included in the program notes. I would be very open to have, conversations with anyone that's struggling with this. I know Debbie does at every community event that she goes to. So just to state that, to kind of push forward with a bit about this book that you mentioned, The Power of Habit. Something that stood out to me a little bit was about the reward aspect of it. When trying to create habits, premeditating your reward for a goal met or for doing something. He really speaks about visualizing the reward, and I just wanted to have you clarify a little bit. How did you interpret that, and what does that mean, really?
Yeah, for me, it's a lot like what athletes use, meaning that they had the goal to be their best and to win the game. But once they begin to visualize themselves actually doing so, what it does is that it just makes things clearer. They play as if they're a winner, and of course that leads to endless possibilities because you're bringing your best game because you visualize what that would be like at the end of all that. I wasn't being too clear about that. Sorry. I guess another way of saying it is about exercise. I can actually anticipate what it's going to be like, 30 minutes after I get off the elliptical trainer because of past experience. And every time I anticipate what that's like or visualize what that's like, I'm more likely to go exercise.
It's so fascinating. Listeners would love to hear your stories about how you go about your new year, your goals, your goal setting. I would love to hear it since I'm not a goal setter, since obviously I'm a Debbie Downer about goal setting. But to kind of wrap us up, Debbie, I was wondering if you might just offer some personal thoughts for our listeners who might be struggling with depression or feeling lost or feeling anxious in their lives as they start 2020. What is something that you wish they could hold on to as they go through each day here in this new year?
One of the things that I hope is a result of my efforts toward talking about mental health and increasing awareness is that I hope we all get to the point that mental illness is just as real as physical health, and that for those people who are struggling, if you could use those same skills that you use toward handling your hemophilia or von Willebrand, if you can look at those same steps and put them toward getting mental health relief, that is the key. The key, meaning that you were diagnosed with something, you felt something, you found the professionals that could help you with it, and then you did your part in taking care of your physical health. And it's the same thing with mental health. So I guess the summary, what I'm trying to say is that if you consider your mental health just as important and just as real as your physical health, then I think we're going to all be a whole lot better once we take the steps.
Debbie, thank you so much for being such a unique and very well-suited advocate for this type of work and this type of conversation. And if you haven't tuned in to Bloodstream every month to hear Debbie and I's, it's very short, but important. I think every month we do a mental health segment together where we discuss some of the issues and just bottom line foundational thought around some things that are plaguing us as human beings. Please check out Bloodstream every month. And just another plug that Debbie has many things in the cooker for this year around mental health, including some very exciting initiatives coming out of Believe Limited and the National Hemophilia Foundation. If you have personal interest, please contact your local chapter to see if they have anything on the calendar. I am sure they are in the process of trying to figure out where they can get Debbie in their schedules as well. Both of us, Debbie and I being executive directors, we know how that works. Please check with your local chapter and keep updated on what Debbie is doing through social media and Mental Health Matters too. Debbie, thank you so much for joining us as always. You're always one of my favorite people to have a conversation with.
Thank you. I always enjoyed talking to you because it's so good for my self-esteem. So just awesome.
You are loved. You are loved. Thank you. And listeners, that is all for episode 35 of Ask the Expert. We're going to be back another month. Wait a minute. We're going to be back next month, rather, with another expert interview in our new format. So we are very excited for you to join us in February. Thank you again, Debbie. And we'll see you next month.
All right. Thank you. See you then.
BloodstreamMedia.com is your one-stop shop for all of Bloodstream Media's podcasts for the bleeding disorder community.
Once on BloodstreamMedia.com, don't forget to follow the links to subscribe to the Bloodstream podcast, Ask the Expert podcast, the Powering Through podcast, and the Bloodline podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Have an idea for a future episode of Ask the Expert? Have a question that you would like to hear an expert answer?
Email us at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com. You'll also find Bloodstream Media on facebook.com/bloodstreammedia and on Twitter @bloodstreaminfo.
This episode of Ask the Expert was written by Amy Board.
Produced by Patrick James Lynch.
Rob Bradford.
Joshua Sterling Bragg.
Avra Friedman.
And Colby Crow.
Artwork by Katie Wright Mead.
And Ryan Gielen.
And the Ask the Expert podcast is edited by Allison Stoney.
I'm your host, Amy Board, and until next time, embrace that mystery and fear of life. You are not alone.